Now, even if the rocks end up working out, and even if there is infrastructure to support a mining operation, mining is not only about rocks and roads. Matter of fact, most of the times it's just about rocky roads. That's a different point altogether, though. And so, as cliche as this may sound, in large part, mining is about people. That's why now I'm in Astana, which is the capital city of Kazakhstan. It's about a 3.5-hour drive from RSS projects, and I'm here to meet with Sultanov. He's with Aurora Geophysical Services, and Said's worked or dealt with the Kazakh government for decades now, but he's also worked in the West. He's went to school in the West, and he's worked in Canada and so on. And so I'm kind of hoping that he knows both worlds essentially, and can talk to me about the social situation here, as well as the government permitting corruption and other stuff, maybe some of the topics that are not as widely discussed out there. So let's go and talk to Said. Said, let's kick it off by talking about the government here and what mining means to the government. I mean, I see this big map behind you that kind of shows all the occurrences of minerals. So it seems like there's a lot of it in Kazakhstan, but does the government care about mining?
Well, of course. I mean, mining is the essential part of the economy of Kazakhstan, and as you can see, it has been the legacy of mining has been here for the hundreds of years, and as a result, we have today is a big interest of international major companies coming to Kazakhstan to explore. But the one thing that we may perhaps lack are the, let's say, elephant discoveries, and this is what the government is right now. Trying to stimulate exploration, and in this sense, that's why a new mining code has been introduced based on the West Australia mining code.
When you say stimulate exploration, what does that mean? Does it mean, like, is there free money to be had, or what does that look like?
I wouldn't say free money, but it's the ability to acquire licenses. Like back in the old days, it was not possible to pick up exploration license, or you had to go through a quasi-government companies or state-owned companies, and they would take 25% share. Essentially, you would ask for, it's like, excuse me, but this is just the exploration stage. So government has abolished this and introduced a new concept, first come, first serve. So therefore, as of today, like, there are over 3,000 new licenses have been issued, and as a result, we see probably more than 10 companies out of the top 20 in the world that are right now actively exploring in Kazakhstan.
How transparent is the process? Like, if I, for example, would have started a company and came here applying for a license, am I going to be able to follow through with the process, or is it kind of you give it to the government and it's kind of in their hands? They decide what happens, but you really have no visibility over how the process works.
No, actually, the process is very easy, and there isn't much of the government involvement as such. I mean, you don't have this man-to-man interaction in these days. Like in terms of digitization and let's say the jurisdiction, today in Kazakhstan you can come over yourself or your company. You can register a company on Astana International Financial Center. That's according to UK common law that gives you the comfort. And with that company, open up the bank accounts and apply for the exploration license all online. And you would track your license online. And let's say on average, it would be approximately about 2 months before you get your license. And this would be without actually going or kind of seeing any kind of government representatives. And as a result, we see so many licenses are being acquired.
That's so just basically from desktop work to me drilling, 2 months.
I wouldn't say to drilling right away, because I mean, once you have let's say acquired a license, you need to come up with an exploration plan. Exploration plan needs to be approved by the ecological and whatever the local area, local community hearings as well with the local Akimat. So in other words, before you get to drilling, and that's again, let's not forget that Kazakhstan has winter season, so therefore you need to start to plan your field season ahead of time. But like, for example, as we are right now in May, this is like the field season has started. Everybody's out in the field, as you see. Like, we're right now at the Aurora office, it's quiet. It's majority of the people, it's not because it's a holiday, but it's because they're in the field working.
I thought you just liked having a large office for yourself. What about expropriation risks? I mean, what if you go through that process, you go through exploration, you find something,
Yeah.
is there a risk of the government or anybody knocking on your door and saying, hey, we're taking that, you can't do anything about it?
That's why UK common law has been introduced here as part of this move to attract foreign investors, and as a result, it has been quite successful, I thought. And so far, we haven't heard any of the big cases where government has expropriated any kind of licenses or deposits. However, there were cases of such, let's say, in the past, that's over 10 years ago. But these were the cases which some of them are debated in the international hearings, but the most of them is that you got to see, did they apply like all those environmental laws back then? I mean, so therefore these are old cases to comment. But in terms of the new licenses, I haven't seen a single case yet. Because on most part of them, these are actually the companies themselves are trying now to see that if the ground is not prospectful, and they would go through the process of surrendering the ground. And this is where it's one of those cases where government wasn't ready as such that the investors would pick up the ground, do the work, and then start surrendering. Because the mechanism of surrendering the ground is also not so simple, because you have to, again, make sure that all the environmental kind of repercussions or any damage, if it has been done, it has to be carefully analyzed, not only by the local government over there, but various other bodies as well. So it's a bit of a process.
So when, we from the West look at some of the horror stories, if you will, with some of the neighbors, like what happened with Sintera in Kyrgyzstan a while back, like this is not similar. So it's different here.
Well, of course. I mean, Kazakhstan is the most successful, let's say, economy in Central Asia. Second of all, I think we are the most that attracts all the foreign direct investments. And in terms of the mining and the oil and gas industry, we have been working with such investors since the independence, since the 90s, right? So that's why we have this long-standing, I think, credibility. As for the Kyrgyzstan case, I mean, if you, let's say, look deep into this, because, for example, I know that case quite well, and I think in many cases, like, there is an ecological issue to that, which is quite a serious issue, which needs to be investigated further, and only then certain decisions need to be made, because potentially that could damage the SSU region and potentially can hurt south of Kazakhstan, because it's located in the mountains, while underneath it all this cyanide has been. So, but I don't want to get into that, but it has its own, let's say, two sides to that story. But nonetheless, that mine is a world-class mine. I mean, it was mined since the 90s. I think they have extracted nearly 12 million ounces of gold out of the Kumtor mine, and it's still producing. And today, it's like it belongs to the state, but the state is, with that revenue, is doing something more to develop the exploration business as such in Kyrgyzstan as well. Because exploration in Central Asia, this is something that's required. I mean, to the state, they have a debate where it's like, well, we cannot wait forever for international investors to come. What if they don't? Or they will come or they will leave. But they know that example of the Soviet Union, when the state just went and just explored everything and put so much of the state budget's money into exploration.
The ecological stuff that you bring up is important to me, because if we look at the map today, or we look at a map from 60, 70 years ago, there's one sea less on this map, where there's also two rivers disrupted and whatnot by supposedly the Russian activity down in the south. So there could be large ecological challenges if things are not done properly. Looking at where Aras is up in the north, or let's call it the northeast, how is it from an ecological perspective, or ecological challenges and risks?
The Pavlodar region where Aras is located, it's an industrial region, and quite a lot of industrial companies are operating there right now, and there are future, let's say, plans for industrial development over there. Given that the mining town of Akibastus, it has been there, I think, for about 80, 70 years, I mean, and the kind of the locals, they are involved one way or the other in the mining industry, because they have a Bogatyr coal mine over there, which is also like the gigantic coal mine over there. So from the ecological point of view, yes, the law has become stricter, but nonetheless, we as Aurora have been engaged in talks over the environmental issues with the local communities over there. Overall, the local community kind of supports the development of the industrial part of the Pavlodar region. And plus, there are plans for a big autoclave production over in the Pavlodar region, which is quite an ambitious project, which is supported by the government.
Well, the locals are also then kind of the next part that I wanted to talk about. You've already touched upon it here briefly. How much power do local communities get over their land? Is it used for hunting in one way or another, or farming, or how much power do the locals have? How important is it?
According to the new ecological code, before you conduct any kind of exploration or mining activity, you gotta have the local hearings based on the ecological mining code, or ecological code. So they would have to vote, and you have to present them what you're going to be doing, and also what are the social aspects that you're going to be contributing to the local town. And therefore, we see lots of mining companies actually actively building, let's say, kindergartens, some taking obligations to build the schools, or perhaps get involved in the hospital. I mean, this is also comes with many companies actually being ESG compliant. So at the same time, but people do have let's say, an influential part in the development of the region over there, because they have their say. It just so happens that with the Pavlodar region, with so many industrial companies, like with the Karaganda region, I mean, they know that the economy and the wealth of the region depends on these industrial companies being successful. And right now, with the sanctions that is happening, let's say, against our neighbors, some of these companies have certain, let's say, vulnerabilities.
When you talk about the sanctions and everything happening, and also that process with the community, I'm also thinking about corruption. Corruption is a fact of life, I think, in every country around the world. How is corruption in Kazakhstan, both within local communities who might have, leaders of the local communities, but also within government?
It's a very, let's say, good question, tough question. There were cases of corruption in Kazakhstan, especially in the past. Right now, with the digitization and with the ability to apply online or deal with the most cases via online mechanisms or platforms, and given that there is AFC as a UK court, it does gives more leverage to the business. And I myself have been involved in AFC legal case, and I must say it was the judge was from United Kingdom, and it was fair. And in this sense, I'm not saying that the Kazakh legal system is in any way so bad, but what I'm saying is, for an investor's point of view, if he wants, he can go and appeal on AFC, and I think it would be a fair rule. In this sense, to our locals, over this political transit that's been taking place over the last few years in Kazakhstan, it's also one of those tests, because they have promised something new. They have promised new programs that it's not going to be like in the old days, and that's why they even proclaim the program. They say it's new Kazakhstan, and therefore we kind of prepare for the worst but hope for the better, in a sense that things are getting better, and we must be openly saying that things are getting better. It's just the external environment is also tough these days, when you have such neighbors from the north, from the east. Of course, we have other neighbors across the Caspian, and we as Kazakhstan, being the 9th biggest country in the world, I mean, over the centuries, we have been very, let's say, careful in mitigating those relationships. And in this way, you see in Kazakhstan, there are multinationals, multicultural, multi-religious, and they all kind of get along with each other.
You live here in Astana, that's right,
yes.
Full time. When you talk about the new Kazakhstan 2.0, if you will, after its independence, there's also a surge in organized crime. How is that these days in 2025? What does it feel like? Do you come in touch with it like on a regular basis living here in Astana, or what does it look like?
Organized crime.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest with you, I think Kazakhstan is quite safe. Like in comparison, let's say, to downtown London, downtown New York, and I've been there, I think those places are actually much scarier, especially some of the parts of those, let's say, capitals. In this sense, Kazakhstan is safe. Astana is extremely safe town as well, and as you might walk around and you see there's lots of CCTV as well. And at the same time, any kind of even small cases, they right away become something on the media, like something on the TV, and this is where, like, there is this poll that says lots of Kazakhs, especially young, they want to leave the country. I have lived abroad. I've lived in United Kingdom, in Canada, and I know what it's like and how tough it is to compete out there with many, many other nationals from across the world and with the locals, with professionals. I mean, it is quite a tough environment. While here, some of the people think that, look, it's going to be easy out there. Well, it's not. And therefore, it's actually like, if you compare it in terms of the food basket, the economic scores, like what the country does for you, what the state provides, like I think today Kazakhstan, in terms of its geopolitical, geoeconomical position, is quite a prosperous and has a big potential. At least this is what I believe, and this is why I live here. I raise my kids here. They learn the local Kazakh language over here, and like over the course of these, let's say, next few decades, in terms of the critical minerals race, this is giving Kazakhstan really a big advantage. And in this sense, of course, we need to have a leadership that's quite strong. And in terms of the organized crime and all of this such, well, our official authorities, I would say, they crack down on them, and maybe sometimes even too harsh.
When you're mentioning the minerals potential there, and for a second I remember that I should have asked you about uranium, because Kazakhstan is the largest producer of uranium worldwide. What happens, but it is always state controlled, so there's no foreign companies solely producing uranium. There are JVs with Canadian companies. I do know that. What happens if Eris and stumbles onto uranium without them wanting or knowing that? What happens to the projects in that case?
In terms of the uranium, this is Kazakhstan, let's say, strategic leadership in the world. And in terms of uranium, that 40% of the Kazakhstan uranium comes from the Shusarasu region, that's in the south of Kazakhstan. And why it's strategic is because the cost of production is quite low over there, about $8, $10, $12 per pound, because it's in situ heat bleaching, right? While, let's say, in Pavlodar region, I wouldn't think geologically they would find that. That's the most common one. And second of all, when the main concentration is of course in the south of Kazakhstan. So therefore, I don't think Aras has much to worry about. And second of all, I mean, Aras came here in the last 4 years. I mean, all the licenses are picked up according to the law, the current mining code. But I know that their companies, I think they are based on the AIFC. So, I mean, they shouldn't be even, I think, a risk or a thought about this. Nonetheless, of course, there are talks of this potential law that's in the making, perhaps, and we don't know what's going to be like the final of that law, the proposed energy bill, where this uranium part is taking place, but I can't comment on that yet because it's not law yet.
Right. What about royalties? I mean, you know, the government wants participation or to control it when it's a uranium deposit. What about if it's not a uranium deposit? Do they get some kind of a royalty that's free carried or anything like that?
The royalty system is something that's very transparent and quite well understood by the Western companies, especially by the Western companies. And this is something that they've been voicing over the years in Kazakhstan, that we have to introduce the royalty system. While in Kazakhstan we have mineral extraction tax, or what we call a MET tax. That one it's more common. It's kind of you see, it's a complex question because it's connected again to the resource and reserve estimation. On one side you have JKZ, old Soviet system, and on the other side you have the CRISCO with an I-43-101 with the JORC system. So therefore it's like the royalty system, as we believe, is going to be introduced in the new tax code, which just went through the second hearing over in Parliament and got the approval. However, the royalty system is going to be based only to the licenses. That's new mining code licenses issued, I think, starting from 2027. So therefore, the companies that are right now that are exploring, they're not going to be, I think, at the mining stage at 2027. So therefore, to discuss the how it might affect and what will happen, I mean, we right now ourselves are still in the stages, what will this potential new amendments into the tax bill that Kazakhstan is right now debating about and soon is going to be approving, like what will the impacts be for the mining industry. But beforehand, I mean, we were fighting a situation when they were thinking like, for example, to increase the corporate tax to 25%. Like right now, we know it's like, look, it's going to be left at 20%. So they are trying to increase the VAT at the same time. But I mean, they had the idea of like, look, let's increase the VAT to 20% from the current 12. But this is where, like, we as let's say geological exploration community, Kazakhstan Chamber of Mines, kind of said, look, I mean, VAT on exploration. I mean, come on, it's like, you guys should abolish the VAT overall for the explorers by the end of the day.
Yeah, or at all. Amen to that. But what do you think is the biggest risk or challenge? If you had a magic stick and you could solve something within the permitting process, or generally how the government goes about mining and exploration, what would you wave that magic stick at?
It's less government involvement. Because when they say they're going to be like the principles of yellow pages, if there is a business that's already in the industry, government shouldn't create such a business. Because this sometimes, like they say, yes, we're not going to be involved. Then, of course, the price of certain minerals, say, fluctuates right away. Of course, new people come to the government and they come with an idea, well, how about then we have a government interest? Yeah. And given that we have, let's say, our neighbors, and they transpire those examples where there are only the state companies, and so therefore there's always this kind of debate here in Kazakhstan, should we have state companies or market companies? Well, I strongly believe in the market. I strongly believe that we should have a market economy, and therefore like there should be a fair competition. And I think this is like the most important thing that our government should stick to. Like, we should have a fair competition, access by the foreign investors, local investors, kind of promote that the local investors and foreign investors build, let's say, junior companies. Like, for example, Aras was the first, let's say, good case and genuine, and we need to have many, many more like this in Kazakhstan. And if they will be placing their shares on Toronto Stock Exchange, Australian Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange, that would be the best.